うるさいって言ってんだろ、お前。
but it's okay. Che, oye, che. Date quieto ya, Dios. Arriba un poco, tío. Hey, stop, bro. Don't touch me, bro. Oh! Give me my fucking phone, bro. Give me my fucking phone, bro. Let's go down here. We'll talk.
In recent months, Japan has been undergoing a significant transformation, and it's not a positive one. On the streets, protests by Japanese people complaining about mass tourism and immigration are growing. Many say that foreigners are bringing problems, from minor everyday issues to crimes and situations that disrupt the lives of local residents. Of course, we can't generalize. Not every foreigner causes trouble and makes a mess. But so many incidents have been happening, and this has changed the way Japanese people view contact with the outside world and with outsiders. The country, which for decades has marketed itself as welcoming, traditional, and hospitable, is now debating the limits of tourism and even immigration. Political movements and even new parties are emerging with this discourse, and this change may be marking the end of Japan as we know it. And today, we'll understand how Japan reached this point. Why might Japan be on the verge of closing itself off to the world again? And what's causing all this?
それをね、世界に見せるんですよ。日本人はまだやれるぞって示しましょうよ。
Before talking about history, it's worth understanding what's happening now in Japan. In recent months, the country has entered a major debate about immigration and mass tourism. Something that wasn't much talked about until recently, but now fills headlines and streets. One of the major triggers was the so-called African Hometown Cities, a program announced by the Japan International Cooperation Agency. The idea seemed quite simple: to bring interns from African countries like Nigeria, Ghana, Tanzania, and Mozambique to receive training in Japan and then return to their countries. But just the announcement caused a huge uproar. Thousands of Japanese took to the streets of Tokyo and Osaka with signs saying things like, "Protect the Japanese people," and "End mass immigration." The pressure was such that the government itself had to publicly deny any plans for widespread immigration. The chief cabinet secretary even stated that there are no plans for special visas for Africans and that the news about mass immigration was false. But the matter didn't end there. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has been advocating opening the doors a bit more to foreign students and workers. Japan is aging rapidly and needs a workforce. On the other hand, nationalist and conservative groups reacted very strongly, saying that this policy threatens cultural identity and could bring social problems. The numbers reveal the great shock. In 2024 alone, Japan received 360,000 new foreign entries, a historical record. This only intensified the discussions that had been growing since 2021, when the death of Weishi Mansandali, a Sri Lankan refugee in a detention center, became the symbol of the debate on immigration and the treatment of foreigners. And it doesn't stop there. Amidst all this, a new and noisy political player emerged: the Sanseito. This party appeared a few years ago and exploded in the 2024 elections, going from almost nothing to 14 seats in the Senate. Today, it is already the fourth largest opposition force. Its leader, Sareka Miya, was practically a conservative YouTuber who gained fame during the pandemic by criticizing vaccines, globalism, and immigration. And here's a very important point. The perception of this Japanese party varies greatly depending on who is analyzing it. Some media outlets tend to label Kamiya as a conspiracy theorist, a populist, and far-right, pointing to his anti-immigration rhetoric and ideas like Japan First as signs of xenophobia and historical revisionism. Meanwhile, other sources consider the Sanseito as a legitimate reaction from part of the population who feels that the government is yielding too much to global pressures, losing sovereignty and cultural identity. The truth here is that, regardless of ideology, this party has managed to place immigration at the center of Japanese political debate in a way that hadn't been seen for decades. And even though analysts say their success might be temporary, the pressure they are already exerting on major parties, like the Liberal Democratic Party, is hardening the tone on immigration and tourism. All of this shows a divided Japan. On one side, the need for foreign workers and tourism that generates billions. On the other, a growing fear of losing control over culture, security, and even daily life. But to understand how a country that seemed so open to visitors reached this point of tension, we need to look into history, because this shock didn't come out of nowhere. This climate of rejection, protests, and even new parties with a Japan First rhetoric is the result of a series of events that have happened throughout history. And to understand why the Japanese are so uneasy today, we need to go back a little in time. Japan, for a long time, was one of the most closed countries in the world. Back in the 17th century, they entered a period called Sakoku, which literally means closed country. For over 200 years, almost no foreigners could enter, and practically no Japanese could leave. The idea was to protect against external influences, both religious and political, and to keep Japanese culture pure and intact. This only began to change from the 19th century when American warships literally came knocking on Japan's door. It was the famous episode of Commodore Perry in 1853 that forced the country to open its ports. From then on, Japan was forced to modernize and interact more with the rest of the world. But even so, the opening was controlled, always with a certain distrust of foreigners. After World War II, Japan truly transformed once and for all. With the defeat and American occupation, the country had to reinvent itself. They adopted a pacifist constitution, got closer to the West, and entered a phase of incredible economic growth. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, Japan became a symbol of technology, pop culture, and even hospitality. You can almost feel that nostalgic taste of Japanese city pop. It was a time when everyone wanted to visit Tokyo, eat sushi, see ancient temples, and dive into the anime and video games that were exploding worldwide. Japan gained a reputation for being both a welcoming and modern country. This created a very positive international image, almost as if Japan were a cultural paradise open for the entire world to visit and admire. But this pretty image had a detail. Japan was still very selective with foreigners who wanted to stay permanently in the country. Tourism was very welcome, but immigration, not so much. Japan became the factory of the world. It exported Toyotas, Walkmans, video games, anime, but imported almost no people. This balance worked for a few decades, but ended up being one of the reasons that helped create the crisis we see today. They had no idea what would happen in the coming years. The door is open. Immigration to save the economy. One of the first symptoms began around 2010, when Japan literally started losing people. The population shrank by more than 500,000 people per year. There weren't enough workers in factories, construction sites, farms, and even sushi restaurants. Without young people, Japan's economic machine began to sputter. The government tried to resist, but the time came when it was no longer possible. In 2019, they created a new visa, the Specified Skilled Worker, to bring foreign labor into very critical sectors like construction, agriculture, and elder care. And Japan, which had always kept its borders closed to immigrants, opened a small crack. And a lot of people came in. Thousands of Vietnamese, Filipinos, Chinese, Indonesians, even Kurds fleeing conflicts in the Middle East started arriving. The factories that were almost shutting down gained a lot of momentum. And at the same time, tourism exploded in the country, especially after the pandemic. In 2024, more than 30 million tourists flooded the archipelago, breaking all historical records. But Japan opened the door without thinking about how to welcome these people. Most of these foreign workers ended up in very difficult, low-paid jobs, with very little chance to grow or even integrate into society. Many tourists began to be seen as noisy invaders who disrespect rules and overcrowd cities. The image of hospitality began to crack. That half-open door turned into a gigantic problem. Japan, which had always been synonymous with order and tranquility, began to feel the heavy weight of so many outsiders. Overtourism became the word of the day. Kyoto, once known for the silence of its temples and charming streets, became crowded with people taking selfies in the middle of the way, pushing residents, leaving trash on the streets, and driving up prices everywhere. At Mount Fuji, kilometer-long lines formed just to take pictures. They even had to install a gate and charge an entrance fee to control the crowds. Places that once lived off tourism started to hate tourism. Immigration also began to take its toll. The promise of a workforce to save the economy came along with stories that frightened the Japanese. Cases of robberies and thefts committed by foreign groups, some even live-streamed by streamers seeking attention, began to surface. Public health care became more strained, with overcrowded clinics and hospitals. Cheap housing disappeared in some regions, and in certain neighborhoods, rent skyrocketed as large numbers of newcomers arrived all at once. To make things worse, fake news started spreading freely across the internet. One of the most famous claimed that Japan had donated an entire city to Tanzania, which was completely false, but went viral and fueled fears of losing territory and identity. The spark came in 2025, when massive protests filled the streets in cities like Tokyo, Osaka, and even Saitama. Signs reading "Protect Japan" and "Invaders Out" began to appear. Kurdish groups who were already victims of prejudice became direct targets, often unfairly accused of crimes and of stealing jobs. The climate in the country began to grow increasingly tense, and this feeling didn't stop in the streets. It started to invade politics. In the June 2025 elections, a party that almost nobody took seriously, the Sanseito, made a significant leap. With the slogan "Japan First," they copied much of Trump's style, with strong nationalism, anti-immigration, and a hefty dose of fear about security and jobs. For the first time, they won important seats in the Senate and became international news. Figures like Yusuke Kawai took advantage of the tense atmosphere and began openly blaming immigrants for problems like inflation, violence, and loss of cultural identity. And it wasn't just empty rhetoric. YouTube, TikTok, and other social networks became very powerful weapons. Viral videos, memes inciting hatred, and influencers going live against foreigners helped spread the idea that Japan is being invaded. We understand that part of this feeling is valid. People have the right to feel this way, but much of this assertion is purely mass political propaganda. The phenomenon is very reminiscent of what happened in the United States and parts of Europe. And the protests that were already strong became fuel for a wave that exploded in 2025, placing Japan in one of the most tense moments of its recent history. Between June and September 2025, Japan entered a climate that no one imagined seeing. Cities known for silence and organization, like the ones I mentioned, were taken over by massive protests against immigration and destructive tourism. The trigger was a viral video, a foreign streamer assaulting an elderly Japanese man. That was enough to set social networks ablaze and become a symbol that Japan is losing control. The government tried to react quickly with what they called the Zero Plan, a package that promised to accelerate deportations, toughen visa rules, and even multiply by 6 the minimum capital required for foreign entrepreneurs to start businesses. But instead of calming things down, it just increased the tension. Prime Minister Ishiba saw his popularity plummet. The discussion about limiting foreigners moved from social networks to becoming a serious issue in Parliament, dividing the country between those who want to protect Japanese identity and those who fear a dangerous regression. After so much tension, Japan began to feel the weight of slightly open doors. The economy took a significant hit. Factories complained about the lack of labor, but local residents breathed a sigh of relief with less pressure on housing and public services. The government further tightened the rules, trying their best to deport those who were irregular. Xenophobia in the country also rose, and the debate about national identity became a daily topic. But there's a very important detail here. The country still depends on foreigners. Without workers in key sectors, Japan risks stagnating once and for all. Is this the end of an open era? Or a period of adaptation where the country tries to balance security, economy, and identity? What we're seeing here is a country on the brink between closing itself off and adapting, trying to protect its identity without stifling growth. It's a very challenging scenario, but it shows how historical and economic decisions have effects across generations. The Japan we knew, with peaceful tourism, organized streets, sushi, and pop culture for the whole world, is slowly changing before our eyes. But will this crisis lead to the end of an open Japan? Or will a new, more balanced, and less dangerous model emerge? We don't have an answer for this yet. It's all very recent. This is happening in real time, and we'll discover more soon. But comment below what you think about all this, or what you believe is the solution for Japan at this moment. Thank you very much for watching until here, and I'll see you in this video that's appearing here on your screen.